Boring is a graphic novel by American cartoonist Daniel Clowes. It was serialized first in issues 19 to 21 of Clowes' comic book 8 Ball, and eventually in collected form in 2001. The story follows David Boring as he tries to discover more about his father, who was a comic book artist that he has never met, and of course, to find the perfect woman. The whole story takes place in America, and there is, of course, this big, scary germ warfare thing going on in the background. Hey, comic book junkies, it's the Frog Queen here, and I'm coming at you with another comic book review video. Today, I just thought I would talk a little bit about some comic book nostalgia. I decided to choose David Boring by Daniel Clowes. Yes, I have it right here. So, I had never read this previously, as I think I said, I was talking about it on my last video, about what I'm currently reading. It was kind of one of those things that I kind of got skipped over, but I found a copy for cheap, and I'm reading it, or I finished reading it. So, David Boring is a story which, of course, is centered around the trial and tribulations of dealing with the opposite sex. Anxiety, young adulthood, oh, I want to touch the bum of this girl, sort of paranoia and uncertainty. How to see women for who they are past their physical attributes. But unfortunately, these types of stories, for me, they kind of seem to make female characters feel a bit useless, domineering, or insane. I don't actually think that was the intention of Clowes for this story. I don't think he was meaning to depict women as domineering or anything like that, but rather to show a man with such little confidence in who he is, and all the trouble he has actually trying to interact with assertive females. This, of course, does not really apply to David's roommate, because she's a lesbian. David knows he can't or won't be having sex with her, so, nor does it appear that he even actually wants to. He's able to speak to her differently than he's able to interact with the rest of the females in his life. I don't think this is like an anti-woman kind of story. Just that from David's point of view, he kind of sees women as like controlling all the things, his wants and desires, but he's not actually able to obtain them. And then thus he sees like their flirtatiousness or lack thereof as a fundamental flaw. But I kind of think like David's roommate is the only really redeeming character, perhaps maybe the only female character who's actually like a good female character, like as in like she's not like a completely trashy person. He's not perceiving her as like this horrible person that's preventing him from getting what he wants, which is much how he perceives his mother and of course Wanda, because she doesn't allow him to have sex with her often and blah, blah, blah. But even his roommate does a lot of questionable things, pretty much just as flawed, really, as everybody else. All the characters in this story are horribly flawed. None of them are terribly good people, including David. But of course, that isn't to say that David Boring himself is some kind of male role model. It's quite the opposite. He constantly denies his feelings, he's untrue to himself, and in turn ends up being greatly insincere to others. He also has a knack for essentially fucking himself and everybody else around him over. Throughout the entire book, I get the sense that David would live a much better life if only he could be honest. His dishonesty with himself, with other people, is his biggest problem. As a tiny side note, I will point out that I think it's very funny that David's elusive love interest, Wanda, who he pines after forever after, having had this short-lived relationship with her, looks horribly similar to his mother character. So that's like super Freudian. I don't even like using that term Freudian. I'm not a a Freud person, but yeah, it's super, it's kind of creepy. On the whole, this is probably one of Clowes' better books, although I don't really think everyone would agree with me on that. In terms of the crafting of the story, it is really similar in spirit to a lot of his other stories, despite the less poignant ending, although there's definitely something a little weird about the ending. And it's, of course, lets us know that David hasn't really grown up by the end of the story. He's probably going to continue to make bad choices in his love life and screw with his own and the emotions of others. It does kind of have a positive note to it. I'm not going to spoil the absolute ending, but those would be my thoughts on the ending. Without spoiling it, Amy. So personally, it's not my favorite Clowes book. My favorite is probably like Caricature or Raygun. But it's definitely a well-crafted story, and of course, I'm not going to even bother criticizing the artwork. That's not something... I can't criticize a Clowes artwork. I really enjoy it. But on the whole, that's my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. Without spoiling any of the story... I think it is kind of interesting how there is that whole germ warfare worry the whole time in the background. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking this book out. And if you have read it before or are going to read it, please let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, please feel free to friend me, follow me on Facebook, and follow me on Instagram, shoot me a line, Twitter, whatever you like. I'm on social media quite often. Again, because I work for a software company, I'm just always connected to my phone and such. So even if I can't respond right away, I'll respond